if you go to marriage counseling, you have a greater chance of getting a divorce. It's kind of like the dirty little secret inside the world of marriage therapists is that we call marriage counseling divorce counseling, because if you end up in marriage counseling with a traditional marriage therapist, you have a greater likelihood that you'll get a divorce. So what we do is something radically different than traditional marriage counseling, and it puts a heavy emphasis on the man to learn how to lead the relationship, because we've learned that that's the only way out.
Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, the place where high-performing men are empowered to reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness while enhancing their career success. You see, in a world full of noise, burnout, and mediocrity, we believe what's missing is courageous and compassionate leadership in the home, because when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. You see, this isn't just a podcast. It's a movement of men who refuse to settle for less in our families, our focus, and our future. We are curse breakers and we are legacy makers. And I'm your host, Mitchell Osman, and I'm honored that you have chosen to invest your most valuable asset, which is your time, with me today. Now let's get into it. All right, today on the Dad Nation podcast, I am joined by Quentin Hafner, licensed marriage therapist, author, relationship expert, and founder of the Black Belt Husband System. Quentin has logged more than 25,000 hours helping men reclaim their confidence, restore their marriages, and win back their families. And what makes his approach unique is that it's built not only on decades of professional counseling experience, but also on the thousands of conversations he's had with wives, understanding firsthand what women are really looking for in order to come back to their husbands. And so the Black Belt Husband System is results-focused, research-driven, and widely recognized as one of the most effective methods for helping men turn their marriages around. Quentin, I'm so honored to have you on the show with us today, brother.
Thanks, man. I love that bio. I appreciate that so much. I'm glad to be here. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you like it. It's a good thing. I mean, you were the one who created it with the way you lived
I
your
was
life,
like,
so.
dude, that sounded really good. That's awesome. I love it.
Okay, well, you know, I know that maybe some of the guys listening, I mean, I've been following you for a couple of years now on Instagram, but I know that there are going to be guys who are listening to the show that have never heard of you. So tell us a little bit about you, the personal side, man. You have a family, and then also, like, how did you get into this space? I ask people all the time, was this part of your dream as a little boy? Like, when I grow up, I want to be a marriage therapist, or what was your
Definitely not.
Story?
Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah. So, okay. On just a little bit about me. So, on the personal side, I've been married for 15 years to my wife, Hillary. I'm a dad to two little boys. I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old. And, yeah, man, I love being a family man. It's my heart. I always tell people I was built to be a dad. It's the joy of my life. And professionally, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I mostly work in the context of relationships. I mostly work with guys. I don't really practice, even though I am technically a therapist. It's kind of a long conversation, but I don't really practice therapy anymore. I mostly just do coaching. And I help guys, turn their relationships around. That's kind of my jam. And I wrote Black Belt Husband in 2018 because I wanted to offer guys a kind of masculine perspective of the marriage game. And what I realized at the time is that all the stuff out there was written by women for women. There was really nothing for guys. And so on a personal note, like, I'm a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy. It's like it's my hobby. And so I used Brazilian jiu-jitsu as a metaphor for marriage. And so I kind of, and so that's what Black Belt Husband is. It's basically this idea of, like, you start as a husband, as a white belt, and, what does it look like to kind of move through the ranks and to eventually become, this idea of being like an expert in being a husband. So that was the book. And then, we have the system, the coaching process, the coaching system behind the book, where we help guys kind of put all that stuff into practicality. How did I get into this space? So, well, it's a long story, but I'll give you kind of the Cliff Notes version. So on a kind of family of origin history, I do not come, and this is where I love telling people this, I do not come from healthy relationship genes. Okay. So I have a great marriage. I have the most awesome, life-giving marriage. And I don't come from good relationship genes. So the idea is that if someone like me can figure it out, then anybody can figure it out. Okay. And that's really important because a lot of people, when they're struggling in relationships, we can feel defeated. Like, maybe this just isn't in the cards for me. My mom and dad are divorced. They didn't figure it out. Maybe I'm not going to figure it out. And so people can kind of resign with a sense of hopelessness that they're not going to be able to be successful. That's definitely not true. Okay. So if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. I come from a ton of trauma, pretty crazy, wildly abusive upbringing. Fast forward, I was in my mid-20s, fell in love with a girl, got married. Within like 18 months, we got divorced. And after that divorce, going through that divorce rocked me emotionally. And I ended up going to therapy after that in my late 20s. And in the process of going to therapy, kind of fast forward, I had this kind of epiphany where I was like, you know what, I think I want to do this for a living. So I had a really great job at the time, working in finance. I quit my job, went back to graduate school, and became a therapist. And so, that's what I've been doing for the last, I guess it's 20 years now. Wow. So got remarried in my 30s, and that's the person I'm married to today. But everything I do, all that whole experience, all the work that I do, everything that I'm really passionate about, it was all born out of my own struggles, my own setbacks, my own failures. And so I just feel a very strong calling to help guys, help that same guy that I used to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard that phrase so many times. I recently heard Ed Milet say that you were the most qualified to help the person you used to be.
Exactly.
And that's so, man, I just want to commend you for taking those steps and turning that trash into treasure and using that trauma to help change the lives of so many men. It's a powerful story, and it's similar to mine in many ways. And so many others, I think, who there's a certain grit, I think, that we have when we come from trauma or, challenging circumstances. And there's a certain, I think, tenacity or audacity that we have, that we're determined that this will not be the case for our family or anyone else that we can help, right?
Yeah.
And so I sense that in you as well, man.
Yeah. It's definitely, and that's a great perspective. I really appreciate you sharing that because, for a long time, I didn't feel that way. It felt more of like, kind of a burden, but I can see it now that I don't feel that way at all. I feel like, man, like all the stuff that I had gone through that seemed so hard at the time, it's such a blessing. It's such a gift. I see it so clearly how God has used all of that stuff to work very mightily in my life and through me in the life of other people, that had I not gone through that stuff, I definitely wouldn't be on this podcast with you right now talking about how to be successful in a marriage. So, God has a plan, and it's always getting worked out for good.
I love that, man. Well, that's that verse from Romans, right? He makes all things work together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And so it's powerful, man. So let's get into some practical stuff here, because we're guys, we love practical things. But a quick note before we jump in and go any deeper, I want to tell you about an insanely practical tool to build connection before conflict even happens. And I just released it, and it's called the Spark Starter Kit. And guys tell me all the time, it's like having me as a coach in their pocket. It's for busy guys who have the best intentions but can never seem to find the time to plan great dates, or the time to think about how to respond the right way, or ruminating over a text message to get it right, to say the right thing. Here's the thing, now you don't have to, because the Spark Starter Kit is your romance on autopilot for an entire year. Okay, inside this kit, you're going to get 365 Spark text templates. All right, these are pre-written text messages, so you can say the right thing every day without ever overthinking. And there's text for every situation. There's 52 plug-and-play date night blueprints. That's one powerful date night per week, already planned for you. All you've got to do is show up and be the hero. You've got 100 Spark Starter questions, which are conversational prompts that are designed to rebuild intimacy fast with your wife. And the last part, which is my favorite, it's a 3-part romance reset mini course. So you can rebuild connection, restore polarity, and reignite desire. And also, it's built in this living document that as I add more modules and add more things to it, if you buy this, you're going to get lifetime access to it and get all the future updates. And I tell you what, it's cheaper than a bouquet of flowers that, let's be real, are going to die in a week. All right? Put your romance on autopilot for an entire year. I think right now it's $17. I mean, it's going to get way more expensive than that as time goes. But if you want to get this, go to sparkstarterkit.com, or you can grab the link to it in the show notes below. You've worked with thousands of husbands, of men. You helped a lot of people. Out of your experience in all this, what are like 2 to 3 mistakes that you find that you observe men making when they start to realize that their wife is pulling away? You know, when she's getting distant, that those first kind of attempts that sometimes can backfire. What have you seen in that?
Yeah. So, okay. So what I keep coming back to, the thing that makes the Black Belt Husband system unique, and where we see guys really succeed in going through it, is that guys are going to struggle in their marriage to the extent that they have abdicated their leadership role. And now this idea, it ruffles a lot of feathers for people because, you know, well, there's lots of reasons. You know, on the women's side, a lot of women don't understand what leadership, what that means in the context of how we say it. So they feel like, oh, what do you mean? You know, you're not the boss of me kind of vibe. And then a lot of guys take offense to it too, because when I talk to guys about being a leader inside of their marriage, you know, their natural instinct is, well, what about her? And what is she doing? And doesn't she have a part to play? And what is her responsibility? And so it creates a lot of tension. But here's the thing, is that I've never met a woman, and I've met a lot of people in the context of my job. I've never met a woman who wanted to lead her marriage or didn't feel resentful because she was in a leadership role inside of her marriage. It's like women are absolutely desperate for men to be leading their relationship, but most guys are too afraid to step into that role or too uncertain of how to step into that role. And so they approach their marriage with a certain amount of tentativeness and passivity that creates a lot of havoc inside the relationship. So going back to the question that you're asking about, the wife pulling away. The reason the wife is pulling away is because she doesn't trust that the husband is going to meet her needs. He might meet her needs practically. He might be a good financial provider, but he's not meeting her needs on an emotional level because he's not leading the relationship. And then so she's going to start pulling away. And so until that guy understands this very critical concept about the need to lead, then the relationship is almost destined to fail. And this is where I depart heavily from traditional marriage counseling, from traditional therapy, where they'll talk about relationship work being like a 50-50 thing where, it's like mutual communication, mutual reciprocity. And I don't really believe any of that stuff. I don't think any of that stuff works. And I could even support it with a lot of evidence. The idea is that if you go to marriage counseling, you have a greater chance of getting a divorce. It's, which is I know it's a wild statistic, but it's kind of like the dirty little secret inside the world of marriage therapists is that we call marriage counseling divorce counseling, because if you end up in marriage counseling with a traditional marriage therapist, you have a greater likelihood that you'll get a divorce. So what we do is something radically different than traditional marriage counseling, and it puts a heavy emphasis on the man to learn how to lead the relationship, because we've learned that that's the only way out.
Wow. I love that. Number one, I'm with you 100%. My experience with men and coaching men in my communities is that there is just a lot of confusion around exactly what that looks like. We've talked often about this on the show, about this confusion of what it looks like to be a modern man, to exercise leadership in the home, where we can sense that our wives are craving leadership, but we don't necessarily know what that means, and we're actually afraid to talk about it without getting canceled, right?
So
or being
true.
called toxic. So I'm really fascinated to hear what you think. Like, what is that? How does that show up? What does that look like when a man leads his home in a healthy way?
Yeah. Yeah. So just to affirm what you're saying too, because it is, it's a word that makes a lot of people bristle because it brings up the sentiment of like, well, is this the patriarchy? Are you kind of misogynistic? So yes, all those things. It creates a lot of confusion. Okay. So the best way that I can explain it to people is like this. So when I say that you are leading the marriage, to make a very clear distinction, I am not leading my wife. I am not the leader of my wife. My wife is her own autonomous person. I respect her, and she's going to do what she needs to do. The marriage is this separate, invisible entity that exists between her and I. And when I say leading the marriage, I am leading that thing. So that thing, I have taken on my responsibility to make sure that thing, which is the marriage, is that I'm going to make sure that that thing is successful come hell or high water. And so I don't need her to do anything different to make sure that that thing is successful, because I've taken on the responsibility as the leader to make sure that that thing is going to be successful. And so what does that look like practically? Well, on a very practical level, I'm always asking myself, hey, how is that thing doing? And you could use an analogy like we planted a tree. Okay. So that our marriage is a tree. So if I planted a tree in the backyard, I would say, okay, I planted this tree. How's the tree doing? Does the tree have enough water? Is it getting enough sunlight? How's the soil? Is it in the right position? What does the tree need? I'm constantly attentive to making sure that that tree is really that tree is succeeding. If the tree could talk back to me, I would ask the tree a lot of questions. Hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's life? How's everything going? So I'm monitoring the success of that thing being successful. If my wife and I get into conflict, I've taken it upon myself to make sure that I'm the one that's resolving the conflict. So instead of avoiding the conflict and making sure that like we're going to just try to sweep this thing under the rug and hopefully she never brings it up ever again, I'm going to say, hey, let's talk about that fight that we had last night. And I want to make sure that we're cool. I want to make sure that we're good. And I want to tell you this was my part in that fight. And so I'm going to make sure that we call that in our world, we call that the repair process. I want to make sure that the repair process is super, is firing on all cylinders. Also, part of making sure that that invisible entity called my marriage is really successful, I'm going to also take it upon myself to make sure that we're spending time together. So I'm going to plan stuff. I'm going to say, hey, we booked a vacation and, I got us a reservation at the best restaurant in the city, and we're going to dress up and we're going to go have a great time, and we're going to do this and we're going to go here afterwards. So I'm kind of giving you these like little examples to kind of paint this picture of what does it look like to make sure that that thing that exists between us is successful. And the point that I wanted to make in those descriptions is that I don't need my wife to do anything. I can do all of that on my own. And what I've learned, and what anybody who does this process is going to learn, is that the more I do that and role model that way of being, my wife ends up reciprocating. So she just follows my lead. And that's what we tell guys. Like, we have 5 pillars in the Black Belt Husband System. And pillar number 1 is, the way that we say it is that you are the leader who sets the tone and the temperature for the marriage. That your wife is only going to be reactionary and responsive to how you show up. So if I show up and I'm super loving, I'm super engaging, I'm trying to make sure that that tree is really thriving, then my wife, she's going to be reactionary to that energy that I'm kind of putting forth. Now, if I show up and I'm like, well, the tree's withering and I haven't watered it in a week, and I'm kind of like, yeah, I think the tree is going to be okay. I hope my wife waters it because I'm busy. I don't have time to do that. Well, so setting the tone and the temperature of the relationship, you can imagine that I'm setting a certain tone that she's going to be responsive to, and it's not going to bode well for me personally or for my relationship. So when men kind of get this principle, it starts with an identity shift. as seeing yourself as the leader, then the practical stuff is very easy to implement. But it all starts with an identity shift.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
That was very long-winded, so hopefully that's not too much.
Hey, man, I'm here for all the long wind. It's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. Well, and I think you're touching on a really key point here, because I think men, and what I'm saying here is getting to the core belief, how we ought to show up and who we believe we are, our role in the home is so critical. And I think the mistake, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think the mistake men make is they go to a quick fix. They go to earn their love by some lavish trip or some big expensive gift, and then maybe spend too much money or do something that is not what they want, but they think that that's going to fix it. But then what happens is it backfires, because she grows even more distant, or she's then frustrated. But then what happens is the guy is like, well, wait a minute. I'm here. I'm trying to do this this is my attempt to, connect with you. And then it feels almost like a kick in the face, to his attempts, right? Mm-hmm. What's actually going on there? Can you demystify that? Because I think, I talk to guys all the time, and that is they're like, well, I tried, and this is what I did. And what I'm trying to complain or explain to them is like, well, you're putting Band-Aids on this gaping wound, right? But what's your perspective on what's actually going on behind the scenes there?
Yeah. Yeah. So, something that we say in our community is that we say we can't confuse practical needs for emotional needs. And when guys understand the distinction between those two things, everything will change inside their relationship. So a lot of guys will try to solve an emotional problem with a practical thing. Okay, so so for example, if my wife feels lonely and disconnected from me, that's an emotional problem. If I buy her a necklace, that necklace can't solve the emotional problem. And so we want to learn the difference between practical needs and emotional needs. Most guys haven't been privileged to grow up in a family where that was role modeled really well. Mm-hmm. And so we don't really understand that. And so it's just something that we have to learn. Okay. So if that wasn't your experience growing up, hey dude, like no harm, no foul, but it's something that you can definitely learn. Mm-hmm. And when we learn it, like I said, everything really begins to change. So to make this point even, I think, more powerful, I would say that, they've done so much research on like divorced statistics. So when people get it, there's a bunch of researchers out there that will go and they'll talk to people post-divorce. Okay. And they'll say, hey, why did you get a divorce? Why did you initiate a divorce? And when we ask women this question, okay, this is also debunking some of the myths about divorce. So one of the big myths about divorce is that people get divorced for money, sex, and kids. Those are the big three. That gets talked about a lot. Actually, it's not those three at all. Okay. The reason women initiate a divorce is because, so when we go and we ask women, why did you initiate a divorce? The answer is almost always the same, and it's said in like subtly different ways. But the answer is always something along the lines of, I didn't feel like I really mattered. I didn't feel like I was a priority. I didn't feel like I was really important to him. I felt invisible. I felt irrelevant. And so when you kind of smash all those sentiments together, you get this kind of common denominator theme that women leave relationships for emotional reasons. They never, ever, ever say, I didn't get the necklace I wanted. I didn't get the house I wanted. I divorced this person because we didn't go on nice vacations. And I always tell people this, like, I've met a lot of divorced people. I've never met a divorced woman who said that she initiated divorce for financial reasons. Yet, us guys, where do we spend all of our time, all of our mental bandwidth, all of our energy? We want to figure out how to make more money because we think that that's what they want, but they don't really want that. And so there's a giant disconnect. Well, there's a big disconnect. I mean, if guys are really honest with themselves, we also want to make a lot of money because it gratifies our own ego. But we don't like to say that. And so what we say is, I'm being a good financial provider, which is partly true, but also there's a lie by omission in that, because we like to make a lot of money because it makes us feel successful. But women don't care about that. Not to say they don't care about it at all, but they don't care about it enough where it's driving their relationship dissatisfaction. What women really care about is they want to feel like they really matter to their man. And when I say the word really, I would kind of italicize that word and bold it. It's like, do you really matter? And then going back to what we were saying earlier about leadership, when we show up with that leadership presence, we are constantly communicating, you really matter to me. And when that starts to happen, women do not leave relationships. They become very settled. They become very happy. They become very content. And the good thing is, if anybody's listening to this that doesn't make a lot of money, you don't need to make a lot of money. And I feel that that's such an important thing to say these days, because like, especially with like Instagram and like, there's a lot of confusion, like what is it if you're to be a successful man in today's day and age, do you need to be rich? Do you need to, and it's like, well, if that's going to be part of your journey, okay, but that's not your wife. That's not why she married you. And that's not going to be why she leaves you. So it's really important to get clarity around that in your mind, because you could easily go and chase the wrong target for the next 20 years and realize at the end that it was all for naught.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
I see it I've in my community and the guys that I coach, and I've seen it honestly in my extended family, and then other friends of ours who've been on the same journey and married, and there is this tension of like, I don't want more money, I don't need more money, I actually don't want you to be at work as much, but the man kind of hides behind that wall, and it's so interesting to see though, right? Because we know that some of our greatest needs as men or to feel respected and to feel competent, right? And so we have this tendency to be drawn towards the thing that validate us, and it sure is easy to get attaboys and to be able to measure our success at work because we're getting, bonuses and, revenue is up in the last quarter. It's like, well, great, I can quantify this success. But when I get home, and the lines just get so blurry. And so you just keep doing what you know how to do best, what you literally spend 8, 10, 12 hours a day doing, which is systemizing, strategizing, earning, fixing, And I think so many men find it so hard to make that shift. And I love your approach. It has to go back to your belief, and the fundamentals, right? How you show up in the home. I'll often say because I work with a lot of high performers, and what happens is we end up treating our families like staff members. Our date nights end up looking like board meetings, and which is totally backwards. I'd love to ask you a quick question about divorce, because you did mention that, and it can be a scary word, and no doubt there are men listening to the show today that have heard that word already. Maybe the wife has thrown it around, and divorce is now on the table. Hey, can I ask you something real quick? If this show has helped you out in any way, if you've gotten any value, clarity, or even just one gut check moment that's made you a better man, husband, or father, would you take 60 seconds and leave us an honest rating or review? And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a drop. And if you really want to pay it forward, share this episode with a friend. Why? Because we know that there are millions of men out there silently struggling in their marriage, in their health, and in their mindset. Men who maybe were where you were just a few steps ago, feeling tired, stuck, and searching for answers. Finding this podcast might be the thing that changes everything for them. So thank you for being part of this movement and for helping more men become the husbands and fathers their families so desperately need. Now let's get back to the show. In your experience, how often can marriages be restored after divorce has already been brought to the table? Does that make sense? Can they be restored? And then what are some of the first steps guys should be taking if that's already been thrown out there?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So just to answer your question directly, can they be restored? 100% for sure. I would be a masochistic person if I was doing the work that I am doing if I didn't believe in restoration. Because a lot of times when I meet people, it's at that place. It's at a really dark place. So it can for sure be restored, and I would just say that, and again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about marriage counseling and like the traditional path when people find themselves in kind of a marriage crisis. The traditional path in marriage counseling that kind of approaches it like a 50-50 thing, I think this isn't just Quentin's opinion, statistically is a failing endeavor. So if you're listening to this and you're at that place, just be very careful as you kind of maybe consider heading down that path. And I would just encourage you to look for alternatives. Okay. Cause the research doesn't lie about what the outcome is going to be. So that being said, I think it's also important to realize that, it takes a lot for a woman to get to a place where she wants to initiate a divorce. Okay. And what a lot of guys do, which I think is a big mistake, is that they tend to minimize the amount or the effect of the pain that their wife is experiencing. Like, okay, yeah, I know, things aren't good. We're not in a good place, but like, it'll be okay. It's like, maybe it's not that big of a deal. And I would just say if a wife is even hinting at that word, it's in a very dire position, because wives typically will wait till things are very, very bad and before they're throwing that word around. Because remember, even though there's lots of, we live in a modern society, and there's, child support, and there's alimony, and there's maybe legal protections for women in a post-divorce setting. It's so disruptive to their life. I mean, it's basically, it's the nuclear bomb it's like, you're going to break up the family, you're going to live in separate places. It's such a chaotic event that in order to initiate that, you have to be in a pretty tough place. And so if you're listening to this and that's, if that word's getting tossed around, even just like, just lightly, I would just say, hey, take it super serious, because there is a light switch inside the brain of women that once it flips, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to get it to come back on. There is a turning point where women will emotionally detach from a relationship, and there isn't any amount of good things you can do to recover the relationship. So there's like a little narrow window of time when it hasn't gone all the way to the dark side, where guys still have a chance. And if you're in that little window of time, it's just an important window to take very serious and to kind of go full steam ahead and all hands on deck to make sure you're trying to recover the relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so interesting. So I want to share a little quick story to validate what you're saying, because, on Instagram, for example, I would say now over the last maybe year, I've seen a massive increase of following people coming in who are women, who are following my page, which is called Dad Nation. So it's just really interesting. And so I ask that question usually when I get a new follower. Hey, what made you decide to give me a follow if I get the opportunity? Almost every single woman responds the same way. I can't get through to my husband. He's not taking me seriously. I'm unhappy in this relationship. And I say that to say, you are bang on, man. And from what I've experienced when having these conversations over Instagram, it's like they are beating their head against the wall. They've had that conversation. They're unhappy, and they literally cannot get through. So they're following me to understand the mind of a man better so that they can get through to them. I mean, it's just wild. And then I see the opposite side. So when I then start working with these men, one of the first things that I say, well, hey, what brought you here? And they say, well, man, I just woke up and my wife said she wanted a divorce, and I had no idea where it came from. And he was just totally gobsmacked or blindsided by it. You know what I mean? It's just so interesting. So I think what you're sharing is valid and it's true, and I think it's a great call for sure for us as men to listen and observe.
Yeah. And it's also, I appreciate you sharing that. And same thing happens to me too. A lot of, surprisingly black belt husbands, there's so many women that follow the page because of the same reason. They're just like, okay, wait, maybe this guy will say something that I can use, to awaken my husband. But the thing that comes to my mind when I hear you say that is like guys have a need to get around other good guys. Peers or role models or guys that they respect, because when guys are just living in isolation, doing kind of their life, it rarely goes well. And so one of the things that I think guys can do to hedge against that early on, it's like, no, you don't need to go see a therapist. Okay. Just find a tribe of great men that you really look up to and just be around them, because those guys are going to be having conversations that are going to inspire you. Like, oh yeah, maybe I should like water that tree a little bit more in the backyard. So you don't have to wait till the tree is completely dead to try to resurrect it back to life. And when guys are in isolation, just kind of doing their business and then their family life, and they're not surrounded by other guys that are speaking into them, they almost always let the tree die. And then they try to resurrect it. And it's just like, dude, it's so much easier to keep the tree going and keep the tree living than to try to bring it back to life. And going back to what you said about money too, because like I am an entrepreneur at heart too. I love making money. I love helping my clients make money. And what I want to show my clients is that when you have a happy wife and your wife is so content, you will make way more money. I'm not distracted. I'm not burdened down by these arguments that we had. So I have tons of focus, tons of energy, tons of clarity. My wife is my biggest champion in everything that I want to do in my kind of entrepreneurial spirit, because I'm giving her everything that she needs. So it gets reciprocated. She's not like, oh, when are you going to be home? And I can't believe you're working late again. There's so much support. And we also know that from research too, that happily married people are the wealthiest people in America.
Yeah.
So it's like, if money matters to you, which is great. Okay. That's great. I'm not one of these people that even think that's a bad thing. If you want to succeed financially and you want to build wealth, you have to make sure that your marriage is on point. And the cool thing is that it truly doesn't take a lot of time. You could have a banger of a marriage with investing 10 minutes a day.
Well, because that's what they want. Right. And so the moment you start watering the tree, right. It's like, they're like so thirsty, because it's like, this is what I've always wanted. And I think guys are like, well, can we even do this? Like, it's going to be so much work. It's like, man, if you could just do one, like just have that conversation, or at least just try. She's going to be so thankful you did, Yeah. So that's powerful, man. Just to validate, what you were saying about the community piece. I think that's another big area where we wrestle, because, the lone wolf, we all kind of wrestle with that. I'm gonna self-made, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to put my head up, or I'm going to put my head down and grind it out. And when I come back up for air, y'all will see what I've done, whatever. There's a certain kind of nobility. I think it's weird that we have that, but it was interesting. We all know that phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. And I'll often say, hey, it takes a village to raise a father. We need to gather around these men and show them what it looks like to model that, right? I mean, these are lessons that are caught, not necessarily taught. It wasn't taught for me, but I caught a lot of it as I, grew up. And so, I mean, it's so, like, for me, I've developed a framework called the Iron Five, which every single one of the guys in my community have their Iron Five. They're 5 guys who are with them through the fire, and because it's so impactful. And that was what kept me in alignment on my whole transformation journey. And I did it organically. I didn't know what I was doing, but reached out to 5 men who held me to that standard, who showed me what was possible, who were okay with making me a little bit uncomfortable to become the man that I knew I needed to be, right? And so that was huge. Couple last questions for you, man. There's going to be a guy listening, no doubt, to this show today who feels like he's losing grip on his marriage. What's like the first, in your professional opinion, what's like the most practical first step he should be taking to regain momentum in his home?
Great question. Without knowing any of the specifics about kind of what that person's going through, the first shift that he needs to make is an identity and a mindset shift. Before you do anything, before you go into action mode, it's really important to understand the mindset. And the reason I'm saying it that way is because if your mindset isn't right, the actionable piece is going to wane over time. You might start enthusiastically, but you're going to get beat up. And your wife's going to be unhappy, and she's going to say that you're failing, and she's going to say that this sucks, and she's not going to make it easy for you. And if your mindset isn't right, you're going to crumble underneath the weight of it. So when I say mindset, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about you have to decide. You have to make a declaration within yourself that says, "I am going to make this relationship succeed." No matter what she does, it's all on me. And if you can get into that mindset, then I know that you're going to figure out what to do in order to make that happen. But if you don't get into the opposite is also not true, is that if you don't get into the mindset, you're going to start to try to do some things, but it's going to taper off because the frame of mind isn't right. So it all begins with a mindset shift. And if you're struggling in the marriage, it's because you haven't developed that mindset shift yet. You haven't decided that you are going to make the relationship succeed no matter what. And I always use this analogy. I said, okay, Mitchell, if your relationship wasn't working good, and today is September 25th, and I said, okay, if I gave you $1 million cash, and by October 15th, your wife would tell me that she's feeling better about the relationship, do you think you could pull that off? If I gave you $1 million, do you think you could pull that off? You would be surprised. You would know how to pull it off. You know how to water the tree. If I said, dude, there's $1 million on the line, so every day, what would you do? You'd be like, hey, sweetie, how's it going? How you feeling? What's going on? Can I get you anything? Do you need a cup of coffee? You need some water? You want to go on vacation? Like, I got $1 million coming to me. I'm going to make sure I get that money. You know what to do, right? So it's like, it's a good example of how, like, when the mindset shifts, we know what to do. So it's just a matter of realizing is like, are we going to make the mindset shift or not? And that's the giant fork in the road for men.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's kind of a great example of Solomon's paradox. Have you ever heard of that before?
No, tell me that.
Okay, yeah. So real quick, Solomon's paradox is this, and it's based off the biblical character of Solomon, who was known to be one of the wisest men in the world. Still to this day, wealthy beyond measure. All those different things, but his own personal life, definitely made some questionable decisions. He clearly didn't apply some of that wisdom to his own life, and it really, psychologists explain this as this phenomenon that we can give great advice to everyone else, but when it comes to time to apply what we actually deep down we know, we find it so difficult to do what it is we know we should do because we're so filtered by fear or frustrations or insecurities or a limited mindset. And so this is why we get stuck in these traps, and you know what you need to do, but yet you still can't seem to do it. I mean, Paul talked about that as well in scripture. And it's like this Solomon's paradox sort of explains that so well. And so that's why sometimes, and I'm going on a bit of a rant, but by this process of externalizing, you could go out, you could ask yourself, what would a loving husband do in this moment? And I'll often challenge my clients. It's like when you come home and you park your car in the driveway or in the garage, and you take 5 minutes to close all the loops, wrap up the conversations, send off the text messages, do some breathing exercises, then ask yourself, how does a loving, present husband show up when he walks through that door? Take yourself out of the situation and ask yourself, right? Or the 3 years from now, Mitchell, who's got a thriving marriage, if he could stretch back into time and tell me what to do when I walk through the door, what should I be doing, right? Or in the context of as a father, what would a loving, present father do when he walks through the door? Is he going to continue sending emails, or is he going to put his phone down and sit on the floor and play with his kids? And so it's just this idea of externalizing kind of helps you get around this Solomon's paradox and really give yourself those answers, because I'm with you 100%. I think intuitively we know what we need to do. And so whether it's you're given $1 million or you're, whatever, I think it's so interesting. And I would encourage you listeners, you're going to hear all this, and there's going to be a part of you that agrees with it. And then almost immediately you're going to feel some lies creep in. That, well, maybe this just isn't for me, or maybe he doesn't understand my situation, or he hasn't heard the things that my wife said. Don't let those lies distract you. All right. Every transformation comes from honesty and truth. And so this won't happen unless you're being willing to be honest with yourself about where you're at. And so as you're listening, don't let yourself lie yourself out of this, because this applies to you as well. Last question for you, Quentin. And I asked this question to everybody on the show. And it's a little bit morbid, but work with me. I got a feeling that you're going to like this. You probably already know the answer, but I want you to picture for a moment you've passed away, okay? And the memorial service had happened, and everyone's gone, and now it's your wife and your 2 boys are sitting around the table, and they're reminiscing about Dad, the man he was, the father he was, the husband he was, and they're sharing stories about who you were, the life that you lived. And you have this opportunity to be a fly on the wall and overhear the things your sons are saying about the father you were to them and the man you were and how you showed up. What are 2 or 3 things that you would hope that they would say about you?
Wonderful. Love that question. I think my wife would say too, that that I was all in on the things that mattered most to me. And I think my kids and my wife would say that, and that would be my greatest hope, is that they would say that, is that they would know me as someone who didn't live in a world of halvesies, that that for the things that just really mattered to me, I was all in. And the other thing that is very similar to being all in is that the other thing that they would say about me is that I was a person who always told the truth. And it's part of my makeup. It's part of my core values to live in the truth at all times, even when it's really scary and it's really painful. But if anybody knows me, they know where I stand at all times, that for good and for bad. So, and I want that to be a role model. I want to be a role model for my kids in that way. Because I think we live in a world where so many people are afraid to tell the truth that I don't want to live that way. So that's Quentin in a nutshell.
I love it. I like Quentin in a nutshell. It's good. And this is actually the last question. I know I've said this before, but where can we find you, man, on the internet? And then how can we support you in the mission you're on and what you're doing?
Yeah. So, Black Belt Husbands is easy to find on Instagram. So you can find me there. You can also just find me on my personal website, which is quentinhafner.com. Super easy. And I would just say, if there's anything that this conversation is inspiring someone to reach out to me, just reach out. Consider me a friend. If I can't help you, I probably know someone that can help you. Just consider me a friend, and I'd be honored to just have a conversation if that was helpful to somebody.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put all your links in the show notes below. So if you're listening, follow him on Instagram. Okay, let me tell you to do that because I've been following him for a while. His content is fantastic. And connect with him, whatever that looks like, whatever you're feeling, whatever fire is in your gut right now as you're hearing this conversation, make a move on it. So thank you so much, Quentin, for being on the show today, brother. I so appreciate this conversation and your time.
Likewise. Thanks, man. Looking forward to chatting again.
Thank you for tuning into the Dad Nation podcast today. Listen, if today's conversation challenged you, if it encouraged you or helped you level up in any area of your life, would you do me a favor? Take 60 seconds to rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. This helps us reach more men who need to hear this message. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Dad Nation YouTube channel where you're going to find full episodes, clips, and exclusive content designed to help you win at home just like you do at work. Remember, your family does not need perfection. They need your presence. Your leadership matters. So keep showing up, keep leveling up, and never forget, when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. We'll see you next time.